Hello, and welcome to the presentation slash lecture about presentations. Basically, we are going to talk about what I'm giving right now. You're going to notice a few things that are bad and a few things that are good. So let's get started. Now, why would you need to give a presentation? As a designer, you need to be able to convince the people with the money to give you that money or give you the resources that you need to create your game. So you're going to have to convince people and communicate with those people. People like executives, investors. If you're a small company, these guys are the ones that will literally give you the money to make or keep your company running. Your other producers. So these are the guys you're going to go. These guys are the ones who are going to talk to the executives and stuff like that as well, and they'll have your back. And your other team members. So you're going to have to say, hey, this is my idea, this is what I want to create, and here's my idea of how to do it. So you can get them informed and get them up to speed. Very important. You will be doing presentations. There's no question about it. So, let's get started. So, we're going to need some tools for this. The first one is kind of obvious. If you're doing a presentation like this, you're going to need some presentation software. And it can be anything from what I'm using right now, PowerPoint by Microsoft. You could use Pages, part of the Apple suite of software. Or you can use Google Slides. And if you're really up for punishment, there's some other ones out there, from OpenOffice. It's not quite as compatible as all these guys here. So, that's the software you need. You also need an audience, so you can properly direct your presentation to them. Without an audience, you're just talking to nobody. You guys are my audience in this case. If you're presenting your game, the executives, your team members, and all those guys are your audience. And of course, really the most important thing about it, it's not a presentation, is you. I know, cheesy, thank you. Okay, so, do you really need to do a presentation? Well, maybe not. If it's about a game that you're working on, yeah, you might need to. But if it's something small, no, you might not need to. So if you're just doing like an update on how your game is going, you don't need a full presentation. You're going to bore people if you don't. And we'll talk about that in a little bit as we move on. And kind of with that, there's this whole thing known as death by PowerPoint. Yeah. If you don't take it seriously, or if you take it too seriously, if you just plant it with statistics and so much information, people are going to look at it and go like, oh, I don't want to see this. Oh, this is so bad. Even if it could be the most interesting thing in the world, you can kill things with it. You can kill projects. You make people never want to hear you again. Just be careful. He's literally, he has the font of death by PowerPoint. So, like I said earlier, if you haven't seen a bad PowerPoint presentation, they can get really, really bad. This is kind of a bad example here of what could be included in. This is the Afghan stability chart that they're trying to show here. If you're probably looking at like, man, that's a lot of stuff, and you're people trying to figure out what's going on. Meanwhile, you're trying to tell them about what's going on. They're probably ignoring you at this point because they're like, oh, well, what is this? Or they're going, oh, I can't handle this. So, the important thing is to keep it simple. Stupid? Sure, yes. Very important. Keep your presentations to the bare information that they need. If you want to give them more information, you can hand out packets of information at the end of it saying, hey, if you want to know more, here's some more information, or you can email me, contact me, we can sit down one-on-one. This is effective when you're on a smaller group. Now, of course, if you are presenting to an auditorium of people, that probably wouldn't be as effective, but maybe you give them a web address to look at when they get back to their office or home or whatever. So, next thing we need to talk about is the actual presentation itself. When we're talking about PowerPoint, like I said, things can get ugly. Let's first start off with keeping it readable. All right, so text is a fact of life on PowerPoint, and I make use of it myself all the time. So make sure that when you're working, when you're building your PowerPoint, make sure that text is not too small. Now, with you watching this on screen, it's pretty easy to see that. And when you're creating this text, when you're creating these slides, it may look fine on your screen, but remember, a lot of times you're going to do these presentations in front of on a screen, on a projector, and you'll have your audience sitting far back, and they'll have a hard time reading this. So they'll sit there and squint at it. You'll give a few headaches. Just keep it at a decent size, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Choose appropriate colors. Very, very important. If you're not choosing appropriate colors, it can look bad and reflect badly on you. That's just one of the possible problems. Another one is contrast. If you're working on a projector, some of these projectors aren't the greatest in the world. They're not bright enough to really show your text. So you need to keep a high contrast, black on white, white on black. I find black on white to be the best, so you have the nice bright background with the dark text. That tends to work out. And you need to worry about color blindness. I don't see this too often, but when you do, it's painful. The most common color blindness is red-green, and if you put red text on a green background or green text on a red background, some people are not going to be able to see this. They'll see gray, or they'll see an outline that's really hard to see. So keep that in mind when you're creating these presentations, because you don't know who is colorblind, and they're not going to come out and tell you it is. They're just not going to see the information, and they'll miss something important. Also, please, never use yellow text. I don't care if you're talking about lemons. Yellow text is bad. In fact, it's even hard to see right now. If we look at it, the yellow is blending into the white. That kind of goes back to the contrast thing, but yellow is very, very bad for text. Specifically on any sort of lighter background. All right. We need to also talk about images. The appropriate use of images. Sometimes it's just fun to add stuff, but you need to keep it, appropriate to the presentation, what you're giving. This one isn't as bad as I've seen. You notice it's kind of fuzzy. Well, there's a problem with this. I took an image that is way too small. I believe this one is a 128 by 128 file, and I stretched it out. I made it as big as I could and kind of fit on here. It's kind of fuzzy. You're like, you're making me hurt. Look at this. So, make sure your images are of proper size. and proper subject matter. Now, if you're looking for files, Google Image Search is fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that here real quick, how to do that. Okay, so now that we've seen that, how to actually get those files, let's continue on. Now, sometimes it's actually good to use pictures. You know, sometimes you don't need words for a picture. Sometimes they express what you need. Speaking of this picture, let's talk about lighting. If you're giving a presentation, and you've got one of those weak projectors, and you know it's struggling to show what you need to do. You are possibly tempted to turn down the lights. I'm going to tell you, this is a terrible, terrible, terrible idea. For the reason of even the most exciting PowerPoints can be boring. I'm sorry, this is the way it is. And by turning down the lights, you kind of, people won't intentionally fall asleep, but they can kind of get distracted and start to drift a little bit, especially if you're giving a presentation right after lunch or very early in the morning. So, 9:15, time for a meeting. No, bad times. That's important to remember when you're trying to set these things up. So bad times to give a presentation is very early in the morning when people are getting in, just having a coffee, trying to wake up. Right after lunch. In fact, also right before lunch is bad too, because you get people who are like, I'm hungry, I'm going to go eat. But you can almost do it. There's some psychology to this where people who are hungry learn better. I kind of believe that. I've seen that in action. But don't make it too close where people are starving to death and they're like, hurry up, I want to go eat, where they start ignoring you. After lunch is bad because, you come back with the food comatose. Like, oh, that was delicious. So keep that in mind. Again, also right before the end of work is bad because people want to go home. That's the way it is. Even as much as you might want, and as much as you enjoy your job, sometimes you just want to go home. So don't plan it. So put it somewhat between people coming in and lunch, and then, or maybe between about midway between the end of lunch and going home. So to keep us awake and alert. So keep that in mind, or maybe even, if it's right before lunch, or right, it's been a while after lunch, 3 o'clock, whatever, give them something sugary to kind of pick them up. All right, so again, to reiterate, don't turn down your lights. I mean, even if you have to sacrifice the PowerPoints themselves, please don't turn down the lights. Okay, well, now moving on. Speaking of slides, when you're giving your presentation, there's very important things some very important things to remember. First of all, don't read your slides aloud. Don't read the slides to the people. They can read faster than you can talk. You've probably read this far. Additionally, when you crowd a slide with text and your points get lost in the wall, the wall of text, you just people's head explodes. They're like, I don't understand anymore. Your slides are there to augment your point, not to detract from it. So it's there to, kind of give an overview of what you're talking about. And you'll notice when I'm doing these presentations that I'll click on it and bring up one point at a time, as I'm going through it. It works better. And if you're doing this, and I kind of broke this rule here, people will read all of the information you have on the slide and ignore you until the next slide, where they'll read it all again. And they may miss important information that you're giving. You may say, oh, hey, I remember, I needed to talk about this. So don't use this text as notes for you. When you're creating your PowerPoint, at the bottom you'll have what are called presenter notes. Now, when you are presenting your presentation, there's a special mode, especially if you're using an external display, where you get a special display that shows you your current one and your next slide all at once, and your presenter notes at the bottom, and time and all that stuff. It has everything you need on here, while the audience sees on the projector your main slide, what you're working about. So please don't read the slides out. Please don't talk, or don't just read off of these. Please don't crowd all this information in. So I hope you totally didn't lose it on this one. Let's continue on here. Transitions. 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 Bad. Don't do them. They detract from what you're working on. Everybody's seen every single one of them. Don't use them. They're horrible. They look unprofessional, and they waste time. That's really what there is to it. Transitions are bad. All right. So earlier I was talking about text size. Like I said, on your machine, this text may look fine, especially that first one. Yeah. Hey, I can still read that from where I'm sitting. Everybody else should. It's going to be on a 200 and something inch display. It's still pretty small for people who are sitting far away. Even if they can see it in the front row, you got to think about the people who are sitting in the 25th row in the back of the auditorium, trying to see what you're talking about. They're like, what is that? I can't see that. And they're concentrating on reading that when they should be listening to you. So please make sure that you make your text size sufficiently large for your audience. So if you're doing a small room of, maybe 10 to 20 people, yeah, you can get a little bit smaller. If you're doing it for an auditorium of thousands, you need to make sure your text is huge so they can read it all over. And that's what I have to say about that. All right. So, Bueller. You need to look like you care about the topic you're working on, that you're talking about. If people don't see you that you have at least some enthusiasm about it, they're going to, lose interest. They're like, oh, not one of these. Back when I went through my associate's degree years and years ago before coming to Full Sail, I had a speech instructor that made this guy look exciting. The only course I have ever fallen asleep in. It's fantastic. So, please look like you care about what you're talking about, but don't get overly crazy about what you're talking about and make it look fake, because people are not going to believe you when you're talking about it. They're like, oh, this guy's faking it, whatever. You do need to make yourself, not too over the top. So keep that in mind when you're giving a good presentation, and people will pay attention much better. Another thing you need to worry about: please don't waste people's time. There are times when a presentation really could be condensed down into a report that could be emailed out to people. People will thank you for making sure, figuring out which one's the right one to do. Let me tell you about this. Let's say you're giving a presentation for your producers and the executives at your company. Let's say you have 10 executives. Each one of them makes $100 an hour. Not completely, unreasonable. And you take an hour of their time, to give a presentation that could have been served by an email. You've just wasted the company $1,000. Just by that 1 hour presentation. Do you think that's going to look good? No, not at all. Another thing to kind of remember, by keeping your presentations to a minimum and only giving them when you need to, people are going to want to listen to you more often. They are not going to sit there, oh, not another presentation by blah, blah, blah. I'm tired of them. And they're like, oh, we'll say, hey, he might actually have something to say that's important. I think I'll go listen. So, let's say you're giving a presentation. And we've gone all through that. Good things to do, bad things to do. It's just you've got to work through your information, but you see you're losing your audience. Something you might want to remember is, while you're giving the information, you have keys on your keyboard that are kind of that'll do stuff. Let's say you lose it. You lose them. You're looking at the audience. And you're going, or you see they're playing something on their phones or whatever. You see a few games of whatever going on in the. You do have the chance to actually kind of stop this stuff. If you need to take, if you see they're also concentrating on your presentation too much, you do have the B and W keys. So the B will blank your display; it'll turn it black. You hit it a B and it'll come back. If you hit W, it'll just change it to white. So you have those two choices. Be careful when you're using those. Don't do it too often, because it'll make you look like you're just wanting attention. But if you notice, they're kind of zoning out watching your PowerPoint, you'll see the face. It's looks kind of like that. Even though you're over here, you'll see them staring at the screen. Use those very carefully. Sometimes you just need to give people a break inside of it. So maybe a joke or something like that. Make sure it's good, or really, really bad with a face palm. That kind of wakes them up too. Now, that's what I have to say about that. You are going to be giving a presentation. So let me show you. All right, so we're going to be using, you're going to be creating, it's called a pachachka. It's a kind of a hard thing to say. Some people call it pechakucha, whatever. Pachachka. It's like kind of like, don't call me for dinner. Don't call me late for dinner, whatever. It's a pachachka. The idea behind this presentation is that it's 20 slides, 20 seconds each slide, auto-advanced. Now, what does auto-advanced mean? It means you're not in control of the PowerPoint. Every 20 seconds, it's going to click and move on to the next one, automatically, without you touching it. Your job is to give us information about whatever topic you choose within reason. We'll talk about that in a second. And this is a very effective way of passing a small amount of information at once. There are groups of people who get together to give these kind of presentations, and I'm going to actually give you a bunch of links here. Well, a few links to see some of these presentations. Some are good, some are bad. It gives you ideas, and you'll know the good ones from the bad ones. So we'll watch those, or you'll watch those. I've already seen them. Now, some kind of ground rules here for our topics. We have what are called showstoppers. So if you don't know what a showstopper is, it's basically something that you do that automatically, no matter what, I don't even look any further, it's a 0. You're going to run into a few of these along the way. Each assignment I will give you showstoppers. So if you do, the certain no-nos in each one of these, you should expect a 0. And you're going to run into these all throughout your time here at Full Sail. And the reason why we have them is, well, when you're out in the real world, working at a game studio or something, you're going to be given rules that you need to follow. And these rules are set in stone, and if you break them, you will be fired or worse. You're like, what's worse than being fired? Well, the game industry isn't that big, and people talk to people, people know people, and it will get around that you're not good at following instructions, or you break something or whatever. So we're kind of training you. It's best. You're worried, like right now. You're like, oh no, I'm gonna, mess something up. Okay, well, it's best to mess it up now. Or, what's your worst? You're gonna have to do here while you're in school is, oh no, I'm gonna have to retake class. You're gonna fail the class. You'll have to come back for it, but it's not nearly as bad as being basically blacklisted from the game industry. So, don't do any of the following. First of all, no topics that have to do with games at all. The reason why we're doing that is we want to throw you off. We want you to do something you're nervous about. If you want to talk about games, that's easy. We can all talk about games. I love games. I talk about a game I'm playing right now, but I'm not going to because that's easy. When you're giving your presentations for the games you want to present, or the games you want to make, that's going to be tough. You're going to be looking at people who are, 10 times above your pay grade. You want to make sure that you can handle giving these presentations. So, no games of any type. Please don't do anything on politics, religion, anything to do with the religion. I don't care if it's, whatever church you went to or church group or trip that you went on with your church. Please don't tell me about that. Don't talk about 9/11. Don't talk about evil whatever party. Please don't talk about this. I don't want to hear about it. Other people don't want to hear about it. So, ixnay on those. All right, lists. Don't give me your top 20 picks for best mice. Sorry, that's kind of cheating. It's kind of bypasses the idea of a thesis for your presentation. I come from a military family. I've heard about boot camp. I've had many people tell me about their boot camp experiences. Everybody has one. I've heard zillions of them. Please don't tell me about them. I know about them. I know about it. Now, if you have specific stories about your time in the service, whatever, cool. If it's about that, if it's anything but boot camp, not good. But if it's outside of that, cool. Tell me about please don't talk about sports. It kind of falls into the games area, but I want to be explicit on this. Everybody's done something on whatever sport that you're thinking of. Oh, well, I don't do, I do a strange sport like lacrosse. No, I've had 5 reports on lacrosse. Please don't do that. Please, I beg you. It's bad. So, topics. Yeah. Other than that, you're good to go. Your specific instructor, if I am not your instructor, so if you look in the upper corner of the screen and you see me, in a suit, I think this is when I recorded this. If you see Daryl Malcolm, this list probably is the full list here. If it's someone else, they may add 1 or 2 things. You can look into the assignment at that point. You'll see it down at the bottom, or wherever we decide to put it when we create it. If you have a question on whether it's an allowed topic, email me or your instructor before you attempt to make it. Because you don't want to get all the way through it and find out, oh, whoops, I shouldn't have made that. So, some important things to know. Do your research on the topics, on the topic you're doing. I've had people try to give a report on changing brakes on a car. I'm like, sure, that's fine if you do it right. But the example that I'm talking about is the guy was taking pictures along the way, and he wasn't taking the proper safety precautions along the way. He didn't put jack stands under the car. And if you know anything about that, getting inside your wheel well, where your tires are, without a jack stand under your car, is very, very, very dangerous. It could kill you. So please make sure you do the research on what you're talking about. Follow all safety steps if you're doing anything. Please. I was cringing watching those, so please do your research. I would say don't do anything on building a computer, because I've probably been building computers longer than you've been alive. And so please make sure you do your research on your topic. Make sure you're in depth on the information. Maybe include something, little known knowledge about whatever it is. All right. So also kind of hints that you might want to take into account. Don't wait until the last moment. I can't stress this enough. It takes a long time to make a good presentation. It really does. You also need to practice your presentation. Without it, you're going to stop and you're going to mess up, especially if you don't have experience on giving presentations themselves. And finally, I've had many people get a lower grade because they didn't turn it in on time because they waited the last minute and it took forever to encode. Or their internet connection was too slow. If you have a slow internet connection, start right away. Because not only slow uploads can happen, failed uploads can happen. And there's nothing you can do about except restart the upload again. Sometimes when you're uploading it, it kind of gets stuck along the way and it just sits there for hours. I've had people sit around for days trying to wait for it when really all they needed to do was stop it, start it again, and it would upload again. So, don't wait to the last minute, because things can go wrong. Computer problems, internet problems, whatever. Things can happen. Please don't wait to the last minute to do it. That kind of works for all of life. Don't wait to the last minute to do it. So, while you're working on your presentation, you need to think about what side of the computer you want to use. Right now, I am using a piece of software, and I'm going to go ahead and pop out of here to show you. I'm using a piece of software. Yeah, I know, it looks great, doesn't it? It's called Open Broadcast Software. This is actually pretty good software for any kinds of things. You know, recording these presentations, recording gameplay. So you can do that. It works great, but you have to set it up. I am going to record a video of how to set this up, because it can get ugly. I'm getting it. There's also another piece of software that I will talk about on the Mac side. Now, you could create everything on your PC side and then switch to your Mac side to create this. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this because the awesomeness of this recording here. There is a piece of software called ScreenFlow. ScreenFlow is Mac only as of this recording. Normally costs $100 to use, and that's a lot of money. I don't expect you to have that kind of money or spend that kind of money on recording the presentations. They have a demo version. I want you to use that. In fact, I insist that you use that. When you encode the video to upload it, it will put demo mode on it. I am absolutely fine with that. Please do use that. That would be fantastic. All right. So make sure you upload in time. You start early. And you kind of follow those little guidelines on giving a good presentation. Now, talking about giving the presentation, I know I'm kind of going along here, but you need to find a place to give a presentation. The room I'm in right now is actually a conference room. Normally I'd sit at my desk and do stuff, but there's a lot of distractions around there, and you want to minimize those distractions. When I was in school, I would go out and sit in the car and give my presentation there. It's quiet. There's relatively little distractions there. The internet's kind of slow out there, so there's less chance of me going, oh, hey, let me go see what's on Reddit or whatever right now. Now, if you are giving it inside, the important thing to remember is try to keep the distractions low. I mean, even if you can handle them, the person watching your video might have issues. If you have children running around, close the door, or whatever. If you have pets, maybe put them outside or into another room or something like that. Now, this is more than just for giving your presentation. If your smoke detector is chirping, please replace the battery on it. It's very important. Please replace it, because you'll hear a tweet, really loud. It's really short, but it's murder when you're trying to use headphones to watch these things. That, and I'm going to keep you around in case you have a fire. Be good to have a good working smoke detector. All right. So I look forward to your presentations. The presentation is due the second to the last, the last week. In your case, please make sure you have the URL. You can make them private, but you have to be able to, actually don't make them private, make them unlisted. You can do public. I'm cool with that. Public presentation, I'm just fine. Don't make them private, because if you do, I can't see them unless you know my Google account, and I don't want to give that out. So, do an unlisted where it'll give you a URL. As long as you have that link, you can watch it. So, if you have any questions, email me. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me. Calling me doesn't work terribly well because I might not be at my desk or I'm not here or whatever. But please ask questions. I'll be happy to answer. All right. I think that's all the time we have for now. Have a nice night, day, evening, morning, whatever it is for you right now. Bye-bye.